Like and subscribe right now, or the spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. Sometimes bad things happen to you as a child, such as being sent to the worst boarding school far away from home, or simply being the black sheep of the family, and you wondered what kind of animals your parents must have been to send you there. Don't worry, I'm sure you meant it figuratively, not literally. What if I told you that there were people out there who were raised by actual animals? Not in some myth or folktale, but in reality. Check out this list of 20 kids who were raised by animals, and interestingly, made it through. Number 1. Matthien the Monkey Boy. This boy from Uganda might strike you as an ordinary African child. This boy was discovered in the forest, most likely living among animals, specifically monkeys, which explains his name. He had every detail of a wild animal, and the only thing that might distinguish him from one was his appearance. But even that wasn't enough, because he stood, ate, and behaved like one. Number 2. Marcus Rodriguez Pantoja. I thought such things only happened in movies, but this is a real-life situation that happened decades ago in Spain. A then young boy was sold to some old guy who lived far from civilization. He was to help the old man with work, but when the old man died, the poor boy had nowhere to go. He had to live all by himself. He then interacted with different wild animals, including wolves and birds, and learned their ways of life, forgetting his own. Years later, after training and readaptation, he's learned to be human once again. Number 3. Cambodian Jungle Girl. Talk of a real-life Jungle Book scenario. In the far northeastern region of Cambodia, a girl vanished from her tiny community. But guess what? 18 years later, a strange and terrified woman emerged from the bush. The people around her were certain that she was the girl who'd been missing for such a long time. What happened next was a story of misadventure, acceptance, and heartbreak that wouldn't have been finished for nearly 10 years. How in the world did she survive in the jungle by herself all those years? Did she get any help? And if so, by whom? Number 4. The Leopard Boy. This boy was kidnapped by a female leopard in 1912 when he was only 2 years old. 3 years later, a hunter killed the leopard and discovered that it had 3 pups, one of whom was now the 5-year-old child. He was delivered back to his relatives in the little Indian village. The universe sure does work in mysterious ways. Number 5. Chamdale. In 1972, this youngster was discovered in the Indian wilderness. He was playing with wolf cubs at the time and was about 4 years old. In addition to having long hooked fingernails, matted hair, and calluses on his palms, elbows, and knees, this man had an exceptionally dark complexion. Even though he never talked, he picked up some sign language. Sadly, he passed away in 1985. Number 6. Sujit Kumar. Apparently, it isn't only wild animals that can raise human kids. Somewhere in Fiji, a boy was raised by, hear this, chickens. His family believed he was bad luck and that he would bring them misfortunes soon after his birth. As a result, they locked him inside their chicken coop every day for the majority of his childhood. He was dubbed Chicken Boy because of his chicken-like behavior. Later on, some good people rescued him from his home. He's now learned a couple of things about being human and acting like one. Number 7. Sasha T. Imagine being in the same room with goats for even an hour. That would be enough to make you dislike goats for the rest of your life. For this little boy, goats have been the only living creature around him for the longest time. His mother kept him with the goats for reasons known to her, and made the boy learn from the goats and not from humans. According to the doctors who engaged him, he showed no response to human-related activities, but instead acted like an actual goat. Number 8. Tippy the Grey. Tippy's childhood was rather odd compared to the typical childhood of most people. Most parents wouldn't allow their kids to be near animals, much less wild ones. However, Tippy's case was a different one. For her first 10 years of life, Tippy was raised in the wild, and she somehow managed to become friends with some of the world's most ferocious creatures as she grew up and got along well with animals in her immediate surroundings before being returned to France by her parents. Number 9. Genie. For some unknown reason, Genie's father tied her up on a potty where she could only move her hands and put her in a dark room for years. As a result, she didn't learn how to speak or act like a human being. When her mother reported the case, the father took his own life before the hearing and left a note saying, "The world will not understand. You're right, we don't understand. I don't think there is anything to understand. The guy was a nut job." Number 10. Mariana Chapman. See this woman right here? She looks just like any typical woman, but she, on the other hand, has a different life story. In fact, she's remarkably well adjusted to the world right now, considering what she went through. She lived among monkeys in the wild long enough to adapt to their way of life. She was fortunate to be rescued and now lives a normal life, as it should have been in the first place, but she still remembers what it was like back then. Number 11. Vanya Newton. This Russian boy lived with his mother his entire life. That's generally normal, you might think, but you may be surprised to learn that the mom was too busy to create a bond with her son and mostly left him in a room full of birds. Eventually, the youngster developed traits that were almost identical to those of the birds he frequently interacted with. It's safe to say he became a bird in a human body. Mind-blowing, right? Number 12. Ivan Miskov. Somewhere between 3 and 6 years of age, this Russian boy Ivan escaped his mother and her alcoholic boyfriend to live in the streets. While there, he found love and other things he couldn't find at home among street dogs. After 2 years with the pack, Ivan was sort of rescued by police officers after escaping them a couple of times with the help of the dogs. Number 13. Toddler kept alive by cats. In fact, it would be curiosity that goes hand in hand with cats, and for this particular cat, whom locals call Masha, her curiosity might just have been the biggest act of charity at the time. A child was abandoned in the typically harsh weather of Moscow, and luckily, this cat was there to keep him warm until they found help from a human being. How thoughtful of a cat. Number 14. Lyoka. Cases of feral children aren't a new thing in Russia. Take a look at this little boy. Cute, right? Like any kid would be. But this one in particular might as well be the most lethal little being out there. He was raised by wolves and even had a number of physical similarities with the wild beasts. It's quite mind-blowing and scary at the same time. Number 15. Oxana Malaya. After her alcoholic parents abandoned her out in the cold, she crawled to a kennel to find warmth, and that marked the beginning of her life as a feral child. She became one of the dogs by simply living with them and taking after them in every possible way. Though she later learned to speak and become normal again, she still has a few bits of dog in her. Number 16. Peter the Wild Boy. In one of the most extraordinary stories from the 18th century, a young boy named Peter was discovered alone in a German forest. He was completely naked, and his parents had presumably abandoned him. He went on to become a human pet for King George I. It was believed that he was raised by wolves, or perhaps bears. No one really knows. Number 17. Victor, the Wild Boy of Auvergne. Victor was born a normal child in France in the 18th century to violent alcoholic parents, which made him wander off to fend for himself at a very young age. He lived in the woods and avoided any contact with humans, but the world caught up with him eventually. He was apprehended by hunters who were astounded by his animal-like behavior. He fled back into the woods, but later reappeared to live among humans. Number 18. Marie Angelique Memy LeBlanc. Even though certain tales of feral children are somehow made up, Mary Angelique's life is well documented with several references. After a string of incidents, she left America for France, where she went feral in 1721 and stayed that way until she was found in Saugny-Champagne in 1731. The good news is she was successful in learning how to read and write after her reintegration into civilization, which was also unusual for wild kids. Number 19. Lobo Wolf Girl of Devil's River. This one did everything a wolf could do. She even ate freshly killed game meat while walking with a pack of wolves. There was a time when she was captured by some cowboys, but was rescued by her pack of wolves on the same night, never to be seen again. Number 20. Daniel Laro. In this case, someone's been abandoned in their own home. I mean, just when you thought you'd seen everything, After neighbors noticed an unusual child through a broken window, they notified the detectives, and when they got there, they couldn't hold their emotions back due to the condition this feral child was living in. She'd been completely abandoned, she couldn't even speak, and she was afraid of humans. Until next time, adios.